PCTV, are you ready? Okay. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Pinole Finance Subcommittee meeting of March 27th, 2024. I'm Mayor Maureen Toms, and I'll move over to call to order. Roll call, please.
Is that on? Mayor Toms.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Sasai.
Here.
Treasurer Swearingen.
Here.
And Finance Director Guillory.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is public comment. And do we have any public comment? I'm going to assume this is for items not on the agenda. We have an opportunity for people to speak for items on the agenda.
Yes, we do have Irma report for an item not on the agenda.
Okay, great, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and Mayor Pro Tem, and everybody here, Ad Hoc Committee. Mayor, I have a general statement, and I'm going to go to every, and to the council meeting, and ask a request. Is it possible that the city can institute a policy or procedure regarding speakers coming up front and speaking and then asking questions and maybe getting an answer from the city staff or attorney or city manager? As you know, people come in and take their time, come in and speak about something, and for some reason, questions don't get answered, they're repeated, and it's just waste of time for you, waste of time for us, and waste of time for everybody else. If we could set some kind of, and I understand the city clerk and staff do have a lot on their plate, but is it possible, when we come to speak here, maybe we could ask people to write it down and then pass it on to the city clerk, and then she can pass it to somebody, bring it back, and maybe answer during the next meeting or next, how should I say it, let the staff or the department answer those questions, Mayor, because when I first started coming to the council, I was told if you have a question, other people might have the same question in the public. And it's just a waste of time, and it would be a lot of transparency and not going back and forth with this kind of thing going on. And I appreciate it, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
No, there are no more public comments.
Next item on the agenda is consent item, and this is for minutes of August 10th, 2021, March 29th, 2023, and April 12th, 2023. Is there any discussion or a motion?
Yes, Mayor.
Yes.
So on the, some minor corrections on March 29, 2023 minutes. On the first page of the minutes, let's correct board members present to Mayor Pro Tem Maureen Toms. Just a minor correction there. And then on page...
On March 29th?
March 29th, 2023 minutes.
I'm looking at it. Call to order?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Maureen Toms, rather.
Rather than?
Mayor Pro Maureen Toms.
Oh, I see what
Yes.
you're saying. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then on the same minutes, page 4, adjournment, let's make sure it says Mayor Murphy, who was present at the meeting instead of who adjourned. And the second corrections on the April 12th, 2023 minutes, same thing on page, the last page of the minutes, let's have it be Mayor Murphy. That's all.
Okay. Did you get those?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay. Any other comments?
Just as, I'm not sure the parliamentary procedure for the council, I can't remember, but did just you and I vote on this, or do all three people vote on it?
I think if
In the
anybody
minutes,
who
you can
wasn't
vote.
here, if they've read the minutes and followed, they can vote.
So that's in our parliamentary procedure right now?
That's
Yes.
standard. Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
So I checked with the city clerk's office today about this, and I am fit to vote on this item.
Okay. Is there a motion
So moved?
and a second?
Second.
And all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that motion passes 3-0. And we'll move on to business item. This is fiscal year 24-25 financial and investment policies. And I'll turn it over to our finance director.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Treasurer. I will be providing an overview of the fiscal year 2024-25 financial and investment policies for review for this annual budget development process and for the ongoing management of the city's finances. Next slide. So staff's recommendation is for the Finance Subcommittee to review the policies and recommend them for City Council approval or to provide other direction to staff. Next slide. So as a general overview of the financial and investment policies, they provide a framework for financial management operations of the city. They are intended to set guidelines on how the city will manage its financial resources and provide direction for financial decision-making. They also align with standard financial policies recommended by professional associations and also those implemented and followed by other local government agencies. Guidance is typically referred to under the Government Finance Officers Association, as well as the National Advisory Council on State and Local Budgeting. It is also a best practice to establish financial policies and to regularly review and update them as necessary to make sure that we're capturing current conditions, current industry practices, any changes to government code or other regulations and laws, and incorporate those into the policies. And then I'd just like to highlight that the city is in compliance with its established financial and investment policies. Next slide. So I'll give a brief summary of each policy. The first is our structurally balanced budget policy, which we use to guide our annual budget process. And it says that the city will aspire to create a proposed general fund operating budget that is structurally balanced, meaning that ongoing expenditures are funded by ongoing revenues, and any one-time expenditures are funded by one-time revenues. Should the city face financial distress, such as in a significant economic downturn or natural disaster, the city is able to use its reserves, and it may require the city to adopt an imbalanced budget, but the policy says that the city will strive to create a plan to bring the budget back into balance in the subsequent fiscal year. And staff is not recommending any changes to this policy. Next slide. The next is our reserve policy that says the city will establish and maintain reserves to meet certain anticipated future obligations and to ensure that the city is able to maintain adequate financial resources to continue to provide basic municipal services in the event of a significant unanticipated revenue decrease or expenditure increase. The city does maintain a reserve that is equal to 50% of total ongoing general fund expenditures. They are set aside in a separate fund, and the city has not used any of those resources to date. Staff is recommending one minor change to this policy, and that is to change the fund balance designation of the reserves from assigned to committed. So this just adds an extra layer of restriction on the funds, although we haven't used any of them and we keep them in a separate fund by generally accepted accounting principles. A committed designation is more appropriate for this, and what that says is if the city does decide to use any portion of the reserves, that it would have to be approved by City Council resolution. This is also reflected in the city's financial statements as of the fiscal year 22-23 audit, where we changed the designation from assigned to committed. The next two policies are applicable to revenues. So the first is the one-time non-recurring resources policy that says the city will strive to maintain a diversified and stable revenue base that is not overly dependent on any individual revenue type. And the city does have a pretty diverse revenue base, including tax revenues, grants, user fees, interest income, so on and so forth. And it also says that one-time expenditures should be funded by one-time revenues. And we are not recommending any changes to this policy at this time. The next revenue policy is applicable to user fees and charges. It says the city is empowered to recapture through fees up to the full cost of providing specific services. User fees are usually charged for various services such as business licenses, recreation programs, other permits through the community development and public works departments. And we recently, or about a year ago, performed or conducted a comprehensive user fee study where we looked at the cost of providing those services to set those fees. We also established those in the master fee schedule, which is reviewed and updated annually. And that follows this user fee and charges policy. We are not recommending any changes. The next is our expenditure and budget policy, and it says the city will deliver service in the most efficient and cost-effective manner. This is done through a various ways, such as through our procurement process, where we look for low costs. When we go out to bid for various services, we're looking for not only low cost, but the best value. So that also is something that falls within this policy as we provide services to the community. It also says that the city will use volunteers in areas where operationally and economically viable. And the budget will state the objectives of the operating programs, which we do in our comprehensive annual budget that provides details on the operations for each year that the city council sets forth, notably in the department sections of the budget. It provides clear outline of the services to be provided for any budget year. Staff is not recommending any changes to this policy. The next slide is the debt policy, and it says the city will limit the use of debt so as to not place a burden on fiscal resources of the city and its taxpayers. And long-term borrowing will be limited to capital projects or projects that cannot be financed with current revenues. The city will limit the total debt ratio to 10%. Or as required by bond coverage ratio. So the city is currently well below its threshold. We have one debt that is in the general fund. That is the 2006 pension obligation bonds. And then we have a loan from the state revolving loan fund and the sewer enterprise fund, as well as a lease bond in the sewer enterprise fund. So the city continues to be well below its debt capacity. And we are not recommending any changes to this policy. Next is our receivables policy. It says that the city will ensure timely invoicing, monitoring, and collection of outstanding obligations owed to the city. And these are obligations that are owed to the city, whether through customers for user fees or other levels of government, grants, and so on and so forth. So the city has procedures to make sure that it is collecting those obligations that are owed to the city in a timely manner and following up on those that are outstanding. And no changes are recommended there. Next is our grants management policy and procedures. It says city departments will actively pursue federal, state, and other grant opportunities when deemed appropriate, as grant funding allows the city to leverage local public funds by extending and enhancing the services it offers to the community and to introduce new initiatives. So as you are all aware, we are working with Townsend Public Affairs that is assisting us with identifying grants that meets the city's funding needs in the areas of public safety, community development, public works. We are working with them. We started off by doing an assessment of the city's funding needs, and we meet monthly, and also they distribute a grant memo which lists all new and upcoming funding opportunities, including grants and federal earmarks, and we look for those opportunities that match the needs of the city, and then work with Townsend to submit applications on the city's behalf for those. And we are not recommending any changes to our grants management policy. The next is our capital assets policy and procedures, and it says that purchased and donated assets meeting the city's capitalization definition threshold will be classified and recorded in the city's financial records as capital assets. So any asset with a value of $5,000 or more is considered a capital asset of the city and reflected in the city's financials, specifically the balance sheet. We do apply depreciation methods to those assets each year, and that also is included in the full policy as a part of the capital assets procedures. And no changes are recommended there. Next, we have our unclaimed funds and outstanding checks policy and procedures. And we account for unclaimed funds in a manner that follows government code, and funds that remain unclaimed for at least 3 years will become the property of the city of Pinole after the procedures identified in the policy have been followed. We don't have a whole lot of these. I guess the most common unclaimed funds are refunds for various services, such as an overpayment for business licenses. And we periodically go through those and do the follow-up to the extent possible to locate the owner of those funds. And as it states here, if it's 3 years or beyond, it does become the city or the property of the city. So no changes recommended there. And then for the last two policies, they're related to investments. So the general investment policy is to define the parameters within which funds are to be managed, and also how we invest idle funds. So we have a number of methods, procedures, and practices, and the policy formalizes the framework for the city's investment activities. This also follows government code and state law. There is a change that's not noted in the staff report, but it is one that Treasurer Swearingen and I discussed. And it's a small change to incorporate the monthly transactions report and update reporting from quarterly to monthly. So currently, the City Council receives a quarterly investment report. According to state code, there is another component that we are required to submit to the City Council, and it's called the monthly transactions report. And rather than submitting those separately, we will just fold that into the regular investment report and just report on a monthly basis so that we make sure we're in compliance with government code for that. So we'll update the policy to include that.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yes.
When it's reported monthly, is that something that's going to be on our agenda where we accept the report?
Yes.
Okay,
It'll be on consent.
great, thank you.
You're welcome. And then lastly, we have our pension investment policy. So similar to our general investment policy, only that it is applicable to the Section 115 trust, which is the trust that was set up to provide a reasonable level of growth of assets that are used to help stabilize the city's contribution to the CalPERS pension. And we are not recommending any changes to that policy. So the next steps in this process would be to incorporate the Finance Subcommittee recommendations, if you have any other than those that I mentioned, and then to present the policies to the City Council for approval. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you for the presentation. So just to clarify on the investment policy, the switch to quarterly investment reports to monthly is because of compliance for state law that was just signed? Or
For government code,
government code?
yes.
Okay, great. And then the reserve, I'm sorry, the grants policy.
Yes.
So being that we made a pretty significant switch in September to partner with Townsend Affairs for our grants management, there's no recommended language change for the grants policy at all?
No, I think it's already captured in saying that the city will pursue grant opportunities. I don't think we need to be as specific as to how or what channels we need to do that. This is just one of those methods to enhance that for us.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So just those two minor recommended changes for reserve policy and investment policy, and then recommended to the City Council for approval.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're
Okay.
welcome.
And the treasurer, do you have any comments or questions?
The only comment is on the receivables policy where it says timely invoicing, monitoring, and collecting of outstanding obligations owed to the city. Timely is a pretty loose term, and I don't know how to tighten it up, but I was thinking that there's been situations where we haven't been able to collect from people for 6 months, a year, and timely doesn't give us any parameters where say, this is a true and done policy, and we can either charge interest or do whatever we can under that. Maybe something could be added to that to try to bring that up to speed, because, and not that we're in that situation right now, but we have been in it before. And just to kind of tidy it up a little bit, if that's possible. If it's not, leave it like it is.
Have you experienced invoices that go unpaid for long periods of time, and how do you handle it?
It's been low dollar amounts. We do contract with the collections agency. So after several follow-ups, where there's phone calls, several letters before it is handed over to the collections agency. So there are procedures in place. There, I'm just taking a look at the policy to see if we have. Yeah, it doesn't get into, or doesn't specify the amount of time, whether
No,
60 days.
I'm not sure
or
we can
whatever.
really, we can do that, although standard time obviously is a 30-day turnaround, but, or 15 days if you wanted to make it that. My only concern there was the fact that when you send it to collection, obviously there's a percentage of it that you lose.
Right, yes,
And-
recovery fee.
Not that it's a large item, but there have been back several years where there was a couple of large items which the city couldn't collect, and they needed it very badly, and they were unable to because there wasn't anything written
Got it.
specifically that would allow us to go back and collect it. And like I say, I'm not sure what kind of language we could devise to do that, but
Well,
it's
yeah.
it's not a big thing.
Yeah, but it's something to think about.
Yeah, it
I'm
is.
wondering about what kind of invoice it is. I know that, for instance, if we were to go out and clean up a property that, code enforcement
Yeah.
wanted cleaned up, and we try to bill it, I know some jurisdictions have the ability to lien the property if they don't get payment. So, but I'm not sure if that needs to be in the policy, if we need to break it out. Because that's another tool where
Yeah.
we don't have to pay somebody for collections. It just gets liened on the property. We don't get paid right away, but, it,
Do you know if there's anything in the county collections policies that we might be able to look at?
There's lots of resources too, even for cities, so I can look
Yeah.
around at the neighboring jurisdictions.
Yeah.
And the GFOA provides good resources as well, so, yeah, I can.
Yeah, the
Just
one-
search on
to
that.
give us a tool. We
Yeah.
do need a tool to, if that were to happen. It happened a couple of times before where there was some
oh, the tree.
people that owed us money, and I don't know, if some of it we never collected, so.
Well, I know there was an abatement where there was a dead tree that had to be taken down because
Right.
the property owner wasn't removing it, and I think we liened the property. And we had to go, you have to put it on the agenda. It has to go through a public process to do that. So that is something we already have the ability to do that, but
I don't know if we ever collected on that or not, though, even with the lien.
we will collect on it when, there are some liens where it's collected the next cycle of property tax collection, and then there's some that you don't collect
lien process.
until the property changes ownership.
That would be good.
So
Like at the
and-
next property tax
And I was going to say,
collection.
yeah, in definition and details, number 6
Number 6,
addresses that. So,
It does,
yeah,
yeah.
That
I
would-
think we're
that would-
covered.
Okay, that would
Yeah.
be, yeah, I didn't read that specifically, that it would cover that, but
Yeah.
if it does cover, that's wonderful, because then we can go right back to the property tax and get the money and let the tax collectors take care of it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and we're out of it. So, that's what I'm trying to do, is get us out of it.
Okay. So, with that, if there's no other questions, I'll open it up to the public.
We have Irma Ruport and then Raphael Menace.
Good evening again, Mayor and committee. I'm here to talk about the grants management policy and procedures. Last year in March, I came and I do have some grant funding experience in the government. And one of the things that I wanted us to do is get a grant writer, which we did. I believe it was in September. I've got the contract here. And seeing the policy and procedures that have been established and the contract just don't coincide. They don't agree with each other. And I was reading it, and the grant writer program, they're supposed to be in touch with us more so, and if they are sending us information, I think it's important to let the public know where we're at, what we're doing, because keeping the public in the dark is not an option, not anymore, because there's so many grants out there. I've been looking around cities, and like last year, I believe I came here and spoke about San Pablo getting a grant writer and getting $11 million. I mean, that's just one incident. I mean, I got so many at home that I can bring up to speed. I think it's important that the city and the grant writer, bring your grant writer wherever he's from, bring him on Zoom, update us once a month, especially since you do receive reports. And I don't agree with the policy that our city has in terms of no recommendation. We have a grant writer. They're professionals. Why aren't they here either training you or coming to the city? They're getting highly paid, for 2 years. So we're going to sit until they tell us what we can qualify for, although there's a lot of things opening up now that they might not be aware of, especially in the state and the county, local grants coming up. And they're very professional. There were so many pages to read, and they have they're highly recommended. They're good. I'm not knocking their experience and their expertise, but at the same time, we're a small city, and we need a lot of help. We haven't been proactive in this area, and so I would like to see us go ahead and start reporting some of these. And I did speak about it in March of last year in the minutes. Exactly what I said. City staff and everybody, we got to be on the same page. It's not going to happen with just one person. So we all have to do that. And so I just want a little more update on the grants with your grant writer, and if you could give us some reports back with them, what they're applying for. And just really quick, can I make a statement? Please don't limit yourself when you say deem appropriate. Everything's appropriate. There's a lot of exceptions out there, and so let's apply for what we think we can get and not take it for granted that a person knows what we need, because we live here in the city. We know what we need. So thank you, Mayor, for giving me an extra minute.
Greetings, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Treasurer, staff, members of the public. My name is Raphael Menace. I'm a resident of Pinole. And I'd like to start my comments on this item by thanking Director Guillory for taking the time to discuss this item in depth with me earlier last week and address many of my questions, both verbally and later on in writing. It's going to save everybody here quite a bit of time. But I also had some questions I wanted to follow up a bit more on in this meeting, in particular related to the city's pension investment policy, page number 55 out of 95 in the agenda packet. It notes that the city's risk tolerance is moderate or custom, and that the assets are going to eventually be used to fund pension plan obligations, but the strategic asset allocation ranges are 10 to 20% cash, policy is 4%, 45 to 75% fixed income, policy is 60%, and 25 to 45% equity, and policy is 36%. Given the shorter time horizon of the remaining funds in the pension investment policy now compared to when the policy was originally created, would it be worthwhile for the city to consider altering both the policy levels of strategic asset allocations, the ranges of those allocations to perhaps shift more towards cash to reduce risk, and also potentially increase return given some of the things that have been stated in the reports? Though that's more of a ongoing conversation that I'm having with Director Guillory about clarification there, because some of the yields are showing different values than the reported return rates. And then also going a bit farther down, there's the performance benchmarks on page number 58 out of 95, discussing basically performance shall be compared to the return of the total portfolio blended benchmark. And I noticed that in the quarterly investment reports that those benchmarks aren't reported. And I'm wondering whether those benchmarks are reported in any of the city's documents, or whether they can be reported, because it seems like it would be worthwhile, even if we're not doing a yield comparison between equities and, say, cash or securities or whatever, to at least be able to compare that yield and their returns to the benchmarks that the plan provider is supposed to be providing us, so we can have an idea of, how have we been doing compared to the past 3 years, the past 5 years, and so on. And I know that it says the performance of the plan shall be measured over a 3 and 5 year period. But given that the expected lifetime of the plan now is just 5 years pretty much, we expect it to run out in 2030, whether it might be possible to have more narrow return reporting periods. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll ask, did you have any thoughts on the two items that Mr. Menace brought up? As far as on page 30 of the report, or the policies, or page 55 of 95, where he talked about altering the percentages.
Yeah, so the percentages are set based on when the trust was set up. So it's what is called a customized portfolio that we have. We do an annual review with PARS, which is the agency, the service provider that manages and invests the funds on the city's behalf. And as I mentioned to Raphael when we met, is that we could, this is something that I could bring to the attention if that's the direction of the committee or the council. We could take a look at that to see if, as the lifespan is shortening, as he mentioned, if it would be worthwhile looking at the current asset allocation ranges and changing those so that we can try to get optimal returns based on the assets that we have in the trust. So yes.
I think if you check into it between now and when this comes to the council and are able to address it, that would be helpful, because I suspect that comment's going to come back.
Yeah.
And then the question about reporting, and that's on page 58 of 95, the reporting of the measurements, performance measures over 3 to 5 years, with the, the benchmarks. Is that something that you can respond to now, or is that something that you want to take a look at and could be prepared to address it when it comes back to council?
Yes, I can be prepared. I have a question out to PARS on that one specifically. It is technically, because it's a comparison of our portfolio to these major indexes that you see listed there. It's not done on a quarterly basis. That's too frequent is the short answer. But given that there's only about 5 years left based on how we're spending down the funds in the trust, maybe an annual review. It could be a part of our annual review that we have with PARS. But I do have a question now for them, so I'll be prepared to answer that.
Excellent. And then the question regarding grant reporting, is that coming to the public as far as the regular reports that we get on communication regarding grants?
It is not. It's been sent to the city council, so we send it on a monthly basis. We could distribute that if that is the direction, to distribute the grants memo. Also, Townsend has, they're willing to come and do a presentation at one of the regular city council meetings on their work, upcoming opportunities, so they're open to that. So I could set that up too, for them to do a thorough presentation of that and for the public to be able to engage with them as well.
Okay, and then I wanted to make a comment about grants. I also, in my day job, do grants applications, and it's a lot of work to put a grant application together. So when you look at what the requirements are for the grant, you want to make sure that you have a really good match, because they're so competitive that you're spending a lot of time on something that, you know, the consultant may know that we're not going to compete well in this or that, but we'll compete well in this other thing. So, you know, they've been so competitive lately. So typically what has to happen is that, you know, in our various plans, whether it's the, you know, economic development plan or specific plan or any of those, and it'll be the climate action plan, there's actions, and those are specific programs that the city will be working on, and then that's where we want to match that program to whatever grant opportunity there is. So that's our best bet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just one comment, and I'm sure it's being done, but when we apply for grants, and obviously the grants are going to one of our departments, and are the department heads involved in that grant writing program?
Yes, usually.
They're part of the committee that works with the
Yeah, the
consultant?
consultant works with the department staff to write the application. And then if a grant is awarded, then there's reporting requirements, and that's typically done by staff.
I know that the consultant is out there looking for grants too, and probably has the whole scope and what we can do and what we can't do. And I know, like, we're talking about the city of San Pablo receiving that grant, and that grant was based on things that Pinole can't qualify for. And so we aren't competitive in that bracket. That's just one particular item where we don't qualify, but I'm sure that with the department heads staying on top of it, that we can qualify for a lot of other grants that are
Yeah.
out there, and that should be fairly primary for the
Yeah,
departments.
there's some grants are based on what your income levels are in your community, where a project is located, if it's near transit, for instance, or, you know, a housing development would need to have major services nearby and transportation nearby. So one project in one community might not compete well compared to a project in another community. So.
And I'd just like to add to their, that staff is really engaging, so we're not handing everything over to the consultant to look for us. So staff is monitoring as well. And then also, from time to time, you all from the public will submit to council members opportunities, and we run those through Townsend as well. Most of the time, they're included in that memo that we already have, but we make sure and we try to vet that. But there's even been situations where Townsend may have said, we don't really think Pinole will qualify, and staff goes, well, let's just try it this way, or let's look at it this way. So we are very hands-on as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then a question, are you looking for action on this? This is
No,
basically
it
just
just
a
would-
report, so we don't have to
report.
make a motion adding in the other change that you recommended?
No, we'll add those in and then put it on consent for the full
Oh,
council.
it says no action is requested.
Okay?
Yes.
So in regards to the, to making available the monthly reports from Townsend to the public,
Yes.
you post it on the website, is that direction that we can give when this comes back to council? Or is that just a recommendation that we can just make? And the city manager could follow through on that?
I would suggest that the city council meeting, if we put that forward.
When the financial,
Direction, when the actual policies go before the full council, yes.
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, with that, our next item on the agenda is adjournment. So,
I can handle that.
thank you all, thank you for coming. And happy budget, well, I was going to say, happy budget season.
Yeah, this kicks it off.